right. Next, we will be going into technical session number 5. As we have stated repeatedly throughout this cohort, we're kind of doing these technical sessions out of order to kind of closer match them up to Coursera, so that you're getting most of the same type of material at the same time. This particular class is going to be on troubleshooting and the steps you will take in the process of solving issues for your customers and or yourself. Our objectives will be to describe how to effectively troubleshoot using the 6 steps troubleshooting methodology, use the troubleshooting steps and methodology to diagnose a motherboard issue. We'll work on this one. Now, BSMs we're going to want to take into play when we are working through this technical session is communication. As always, IT is a team sport. You're going to have different skill sets and strengths amongst your teams and need to be aware of that and communicate with those team members. And also, if problems extend beyond your shift, being able to quickly and concisely convey that message to the person who is following up after you so that they know the customer expectations, what has been done so no double work gets done, and what needs to be followed up with so that the customer is not disrupted. And again, so your coworkers don't have to duplicate efforts. Also, persistence. We don't want to give up too early on problems. We want to try to, solve them as much as possible, because each problem we solve gives us another tool for our toolbox. Even if we hand it off to a higher tier, we need to follow up, say, okay, hey, remember this ticket, or look up the ticket. What was done to solve this problem? So in the future, if I come across this, I can handle this quickly rather than having to hand it back off to third tier again. Makes you a more valuable team member when opportunities arise, when they see you're a person who's trying to grow and develop within that sphere. They're going to look and say, hey, Renzi's been doing awesome. Let's go ahead and pull her up to tier 2 or tier 3. So you want to have that reputation as someone who is going to follow through, solve these problems, and continue to grow as a employee or individual. All right. Basic definition of troubleshooting. A logical form of problem solving, taking a systematic approach when troubleshooting is applied to a computer or any kind of technology. It is the process of using logical problem solving to fix a reported failure. Yeah, go ahead and make a copy of this one. You should be able to, on your Nearpod, be able to see it, and then you go to File, and then you can make a copy of it for yourself. So right here, make a copy. So you can duplicate this file for yourself. We will get into this a little bit later. Or you can use this as we go through to take notes on as well. Excuse me. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up when you got it. You're ready to go. Okay, thank you, Janina.
What did you click on as make copy?
You what?
File, and then let it drop down. A make copy
so file,
option.
and then drop down to make a copy. And it'll make a copy to your desktop or whatever have you that you can write on and take notes on. Give another 30 seconds or so for everybody to grab that file. here we go. Troubleshooting. Rule number 1, approach the problem systematically. So when we hear that, what do we think? When we're saying use a systematic approach to problem solving, what does that make us think?
Be organized.
Organize, yeah, that's a good way to start it. Step by step. Very good, TJ. So you have a process that you've put in place for problem solving, and you solve it utilizing those steps every time. You don't skip steps, you don't jump around. You have a standard operating procedure, so to speak, or SOP, that, you know, here's where I start and I work my way through the problem. If I do that every single time, I don't miss anything and I'm more effective in my problem solving. Now, this methodology here is a basic structure that we're going to be going over today. However, in your career and as you develop, you will develop your own methodology. You may add steps to this. You may combine some of these steps because you're working through them so quickly, because you do them so often, that 2 or 3 steps may be combined down into one. Other steps, you may add things to it just because you want to be a little more thorough in your processes. So eventually you're going to make this more your own. This just kind of gives you a framework to build upon. All right. So there are only 3 kinds of issues in general. You have your hardware failure. It's basically, you know, if it's physical and you touched it and you can touch it and it broke. And then you have a software failure, which is the programs installed on the computer are not functioning in a way that they should. And then you have the most common computer error, which is user error. This is hands down, the vast majority of the calls you receive will be user error. What do they call them? There's 2 that they call it. It's they call this an ID10T error. Don't ever use this where a customer can hear you. If you don't know what ID10T is, write it out and look at it. So the ID10T is one. There you go. And then the other one is PEBCAC, which is problem between keyboard and chair. So those are the 2 types of errors that they will call a user error. So just to let you know that those are out there in the ecosphere, you know. So if you ever hear somebody mention that, if you're trying to get help on something, call them out. But don't ever use that with regards where a customer can hear you. Like, yeah, it's just an ID10T error. So there we go. So those are the 3 ones, the 3 main spheres that you'll be dealing with. Now, first step of troubleshooting. So this is broken down into rules and steps. Please do not get those confused. So the first rule was use a systematic approach. Now we have step 1 in the troubleshooting process, which is identify the problem. So that is the most critical, one of the most critical parts of the troubleshooting process, is being to identify correctly what the problem is. So ways that we go about doing this, we interview the client. You know, we talk to them to find out what exactly they're experiencing, what is going wrong. You know, if they call you up and just say, my computer's broke. Okay, can you show me what broke looks like? You know, you want to ask open-ended questions to kind of give them room to talk a little bit, because if you start asking very pointed questions, yes or no answers, it's going to take a lot longer for you to get to the answers you need. The other thing you want to do is back up the data. Before you touch anything, back up their data. So you want to back that up just in case something goes wrong. If there's a catastrophic failure, what have you, that is saved. So you're going to, you know, before you go any further, a lot of times, you know, in an enterprise setting, they may be operating off of remote desktops. So backing up the data is very quick and easy. It takes just a few moments, but you want to be sure this is done. So here are some examples of open-ended questions that you could use to try to get to the root of the problem with your customers. Let's go around the room here. Janina, can you read the first one for us, please?
Please describe the problem. What error messages, usual displays or failures did you see?
There you go. So did anything weird happen? Anything unusual happen? Did you get any error messages? If you did, what were they? These can quickly lead you to, where the problem is. Also, they could be symptoms of an underlying problem. And the main goal here is we want to treat the problem, not the symptoms. So next, Fidel, what's the second one, please?
When did the problem start?
Very good, because that could, lead you to what changed between when the problem started and, when everything was normal. If they say it happened this morning, but you did, massive updates to the system the night before, that could lead you to that point, like, okay, updates happen. It could be, hey, I opened up this email from my colleague that said, I want a sweepstakes and a $500 gift card. All I had to do was click on this hyperlink. Then that might tell you where the problem is. So it's still an open-ended question, but it gives you a time frame that you need to look into. Hey, John, can you read the third one, please?
What was the situation when the problem occurred?
Very good. Could be when they were using only a specific program. So when they go into the, Trinium, which is a dispatch program for logistics. So if, every time they go into Trinium, their systems crash. When they use anything else, everything is fine. But the moment they go into Trinium, everything crashes. So you can start to isolate it to those particular systems. Luis, you read the next one, please.
What changes? What programs or software were you using?
There you go. That kind of builds upon the last one. Is it during a specific program? Is it during a specific time of day? Did they have 50 programs open at that time? Was it during times of peak usage? So we build on that a little bit. Marisha, can you please read the next one?
Yes, we're on the fourth one, right? Or is it the fifth one?
Fifth.
What programs or software were you using?
Nope, that was the fourth one.
Oh,
Fifth, what changes? There we go. What changes have recently been made to the system? Did you put in a new hard drive? Did you upgrade the RAM? Did you recently replace CPU fans or the CMOS battery? Was there something done physically to that computer? Was it moved from one desk to another? Did the person recently change stations? Physical changes in the environment or on the system can have a dramatic effect. All right. Kaylin, can you read the next one, please? Sixth one down. If you're talking, your microphone might be muted. We can't hear you. All right. Seemed to be an issue with the mic. Tajma, can you read the sixth one, please? Nope. Mark, you're up, sir.
Has there been a recent thunderstorm or electrical problem?
What could have happened during that? What would that lead you to look for?
Power surge
Power.
or, yeah, or short circuit.
So power surge, or even just a instantaneous drop in power can damage computer components either as well. It's both directions. If it's not getting the proper voltage and you have a drastic drop or spike in power, it can damage your computer. And that's why, you have to be sure when you're installing these units that you have the proper safety equipment. Not all power strips are surge protectors. Some of them are just power strips. So they turn a single plug into 5 plugs. That's all they do. So you need to make sure if you're installing them in there for protection of the computers that they actually are surge protectors themselves. And then if you're utilizing a UPS, you need to make sure that the CPU portion and things like that are actually plugged into the correct side of the UPS. See, I was not aware of this. So when I hooked up my computer, I had my computer in the non-battery side of the UPS and then kept getting mad at the UPS because it wasn't functioning properly. But it was on me. I didn't read the directions. The more you know. Now I know, and I actually, read the directions. I look and say, okay, this side of the strip actually has battery backup. This side of the strip is just a surge protector.
And they don't hide it, Kelly. It's there. You just got to read it, so it's there.
Hey, I own it. I did not pay attention. I was like, I know how a plug works. Good to go. Walked off. Didn't work the way it was supposed to. So sometimes, like you skip through that process. I know they put the nice little directions on the box. I don't have time to read that. Come on. I'm a busy person. Okay. So recent thunderstorm or failure. Next, let's see, TK, can you read the next one for us, please?
Have you made any hardware, software, or configuration changes?
There you go. You made any hardware or software configuration changes? Unfortunately, with computers, if you flip a switch over here, it can affect things over here. That's why updates are so risky, because when they're changing things in one area of the computer, it can affect things in a complete other arena. Hardware changes, if you were in a rush putting the components back, you might not have seated them properly. They may not be fully plugged in. You might have forgot to put one of the power plugs in, like if you're installing a graphics card or something along those lines, and that can create performance issues. So this can lead you down those paths. Thank you, TK. All right, Evan, you read the next one for us, please.
Has anyone else used your computer recently?
Why might that be a problem?
They could have made changes.
Or
They could have made
download
changes.
something
There you
that
go. That's a very good point, Janina. They could have gone in there, checked their email, and gotten that fun sweepstakes email. Like, you know what? Today's my lucky day. So wasn't necessarily their lucky day, but it definitely was the owner of the computer's unlucky day, because they now have to deal with the virus or ransomware that they have now downloaded to their computer. So, Jimmy, can you read the next one for us, please?
What valuable data on your system has not been backed up?
Critical question. Is if you're doing like remote service for outside customers, you're not necessarily going to download all their information to you. You're going to ask them specifically, have you backed up your system? Are all valuable files backed up so that they can be recovered in case of the problem? You need to ask this question multiple times before you get in there. Just be double sure. And then if later something goes wrong and then they say like, well, I don't have any backups, like, ma'am, I confirm this, or sir, I confirm this with you 3 or 4 times before we moved along this process. And that also helps to kind of cover you and hopefully remind the customer that they need to back up the things that they're working on. All right, next, Alan.
I was waiting on you to call me. How might I recreate? How might I recreate what you were doing when this problem occurred?
There you go. So you ask them exactly what they were doing when the problem occurred, ask them to show you, and then you try to duplicate that on your own system to see if it is specifically their computer or if it is a software issue that you run into that same problem. Because if that does happen, if you're in an enterprise environment, that lets you know that this problem is not going to necessarily just affect this one employee. This lets you get ahead of the game for other employees and be able to go and fix this problem. So it may be a patch that needs to be downloaded. And so you can download that patch and then push it out to the other systems, therefore preventing a problem in the future. So something like this not only lets you know if it's localized, but also lets you be proactive in your approach. All right, thank you, everyone. Rule number 2, not step 2, rule 2. Establish your priorities. So we've got to try to figure out what is the root cause of this problem. Beware of user error. As we've stated, this is typically the top error category you're going to fall under. Same with security. Your top security problems come from users, not necessarily from your firewalls or your anti-malware and stuff like that. It typically comes from the users. All right. Rule number 4. Ask about the data and always back up data. If you've ever been in a case where you have lost a hard drive and all the information on it because you didn't back everything up, that is awful. It really is. I mean, it is just awful when you've lost everything that you had. It's worse when you lose somebody else's data because you are responsible for that. So you always ask about the data, make sure that they have backups and have saved and, you know, covered their end of it. If you're physically on site, you need to make sure you back up that data as well, just to kind of cover yourself, especially if you're doing anything major to a system. Next step in the process of step number 2. What was step number 1?
Identify the problem.
Identify the problem. So step number 2 is now examine the system, and then, you know, you're examining the system and you're developing a theory as to how this is occurring and how to solve it. So you're coming up with your own theory as to where the root cause may be. So you've identified a problem, now you're developing a theory to fix it. So rule number 5, divide and conquer. If you're dealing with multiple problems, you need to prioritize those problems and start attacking them in the proper order. Networking issues, the way they tell people to approach it is to go through the layers of the OSI system. And so there is, some people have it, you know, however you do it, you need to take a systematic approach. Some people do top to bottom, like they start at the application layer and they work their way to the physical. Some go the other way, they start at the physical and work their way to the application. Some will pick a point in the middle and then work up or down from there based on the information that they get. But you need to have a systematic approach, and if you have multiple problems, you attack the most severe first. Make no assumptions. This is the biggest one when you're interviewing the client. Don't just assume about 30 seconds into the interview, oh yeah, I know what this is, blah, 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 move, I'm going to take care of it. And then you jump in and start solving it, because there could be other information that they have in the interview process that could lead you to believe it's not necessarily an ID10T error, it is actually a software problem. So, you know, Don't make assumptions right off the bat that you know instantly what the solution is. This will save you a lot of headache and a lot of repeat calls. All right, rule number 7, try the simplest solutions first. Occam's razor, all things being equal, the simplest solution is usually the correct one. I think they also use in the medical field, if you hear hoofbeats, you think horses, not zebras. Unless you're in Africa, then it's the other way around. So you don't think of an exotic answer or an exotic problem when you hear a certain solution. You go for the simplest solutions first and work from there. And you always need to think about the least invasive measure possible, and then progress to more and more extreme measures. This is why we jokingly talk about the King method with regards to computer repair, because working at Circuit City, they would take the most extreme measure out of the gate.
Out of the gate.
That was their standard operating procedure. If a computer comes in with a problem, reset it to factory settings, and that clears up all the problems.
No trying to troubleshoot, no trying to see what's going. Oh, it's not working. Okay, that's $149.99. And I will put your, at least we did, Kelly, we did give them all of their data. We made sure that we kept their data. That was standard.
That was kind of you.
Yeah, it was very kind of us. I like, before we reset it, before we do a clean install, we will put your data on a CD, so you'll have your pictures, and that's also very. We'll get into that too. That the pictures that you would see, you just have to like download it and forget it. Try not to, because that's awful. And yeah, it's $149.99. Yes, Renzi.
Oh, quick question. Is there ever a time when you encounter a problem like that where you want to back up the data, but the problem is doesn't allow you to do that?
Oh, yeah. And those are the easy ones, Renzi, because if you think about it, that means I don't have to do extra work. I'm like, your drive is failing. We're trying to back up the data, but it appears that we can't. You still gonna give me $149.99. And I'm gonna also include another $49.99 because I gotta install a new drive and go through the process of resetting everything back to factory setting, doing a clean install. So that $149.99 jumped up to $200. Now, if I liked you, cut you a deal, I'll say, we could drop that down to $29 because you're dealing with service. So all of this is pure profit for our company. And I was a good guy, but I watched the numbers. So it depends on what day it was, that $149 could go up or down. And the customer's always happy because they still got their computer back with the problem relieved, and more than likely with all of the data that they wanted to save. I was still doing a service, but Renzi, the issue and what I've learned after the class is that a lot of things that it was me not knowing how to resolve the issue that I always kind of relied on doing the clean install. I could have allowed myself to go through these particular procedural steps and identified the issue and went with the least invasive versus the most aggressive. But the most aggressive allowed us to see more people, because sometimes the steps to try to work up from the least to the most could take more time. But always, because we had all the factory disks, always being able to do that was the easier method in a sense. But that's not right. So I learned so much, and you will too. But that has happened. But that made it even easier because all we have to do now is buy another hard drive, put it in there. It's bigger because it's typically a newer one. It's faster. So they're still happy. Like, I have yet to have a upset customer. I just feel bad now knowing what I know. I could have addressed some of those issues differently.
Yep. And so live and learn. And that is why we affectionately call it the King method. And later we will get to the Philbin method of printer repair.
Which is equally as awesome.
Yes.
What is that? Buy a new one? What is that?
It's a more permanent solution.
some steps before that, but yeah, it's pretty cool. Coming soon.
So, as we were talking about the troubleshooting rule number 7, try the simplest things first and the least invasive approaches first before you get into significantly more invasive. All right. Oh, it's going to do it again. All right. Now, we're going to follow this process to form our best theory. We want to reproduce the problem to make sure that that is in fact the issue. As we talked about, like have them show you what happened and then you try to duplicate that yourself to see if it is hardware, software, or potentially a user issue. Then you're going to build your theory upon that to try to figure out what the source of the problem is. So that is our primary goal, try to figure out what the source of the problem is. So next we're going to move into troubleshooting rule number 8, not step 8, rule 8. That is to become a researcher. Though we like to believe that our mind is like a steel trap, it is not always the case. So we need to be able to research these items. We need to know where to go to look for. We need to know the proper terms to use when we are searching for these problems. So that is the difference between a tech and a layman trying to solve computer problems. We have a greater understanding as to what might be affected. So when we are searching for these issues, we'll have much greater success in finding potential solutions. And you're going to have a multitude of resources at your fingertips when you're working in an IT help desk. First and foremost, you're going to have what you have stored in your memory. And then you're going to have the systems that your company uses. There's a multitude of ticketing systems, and these systems have databases, knowledge databases that will have common reoccurring problems with regards to the current systems. And if you have proprietary software running, those are going to be critical in finding solutions to common problems. After that, you're going to start reaching out to exterior sources like Google, YouTube, things like that, trying to search and see if you found somebody else who has come across these problems and, you know, found a way around them or way to solve them. Utilize those resources. After that, you would rely on your teammates. So you go to your teammates if it's a telecom issue and you know, David is a really good telecom person, go to them and say, hey, look, here's the problem I'm experiencing. Do you have an idea as to how I should approach this? And they may have the solution right off the top of their head, or they may have an idea as to where you would need to look. Then and only then, if you have exhausted all those resources, would you go to a supervisor and ask them for help. You need to be a researcher. You need to try to solve these problems on your own and be, to a degree, self-sufficient, but also utilizing the team environment where you can. So those are kind of the layers you'll want to build out as you are working.
My supervisor always appreciated that I went or not live. Okay.
Right. Next step. So what was the first step?
Identify the problem.
Identify the problem. Was there a second step?
Ask open-ended questions.
That'd be part of identifying the problem, but getting there.
Establish a theory.
Establish a theory. Try to come up with an idea as to what you think may be the problem that is causing all the issues. Step 3 is now to test that theory to verify that that is actually the problem. So we want to, duplicate it or, attempt this repair and see if this is the actual issue at hand. If it is not, you need to go back to step number 2 and establish another theory. So this isn't necessarily a straight line process. There are many points where we may have to step off, go back, and start back at a previous point to try to gain, as we gain better understanding of the variables involved. Oh, I'm sitting here clicking on the screen. That's fantastic. Next. All right, rule number 9. Write things down. Again, we like to believe that our minds are like a steel trap. More often the case, people have photographic memories, but they've lost the film. So writing things down, the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory. Once you have written it down, it's there. So you can put into place, I've tried X, I've tried Y, I've tried Z, I've tried, Q, I've tried M. None of this is working. That way you're not redoing, you're not duplicating your work. You're not reattempting to solve the same problem with the same solution. It gives you a good idea. And also when you're passing this off to a coworker, this aids in communication. You've written things down. Here's all the things that I've tried. Here are the theories that I have established, so that they don't try to do the same things you're doing. They may have a different approach or see something that you have not seen. Next, don't assume the worst. Don't assume the hard drive needs to be formatted right out of the gate. Don't assume that it's just broken beyond repair and needs to just go to the recycling center. Or your whole network is infected and can't be recovered. Don't assume the worst. Work the problems. Rule number 11. Reboot and start over. I cannot tell you how many problems are solved by just restarting the computer. Go back here real quick. Rule number 9 is write things down. 10, don't assume the worst. And we are now on rule 11, reboot and start over. So, it's almost a joke in IT because sometimes it's just a program that is hung up, or you've run out of memory because of too many applications open, or a large variety of things going on. But doing that reboot and starting everything over gets the processes a chance to, kind of refresh themselves and begin working again. And then a very large percentage of the time, it actually solves the problem, to the point that, has anybody ever seen the British show, The IT Crowd? It's kind of a funny show. It's like the IT version of The Office. They would always answer the phone, thank you for calling IT. Have you tried turning it on and off again? Because they know that solves the majority of the problems. So they just initiate that with the call, thank you for calling. Have you tried turning it on and off again? And this is why, because you're refreshing it even with phones, laptops, any kind of computer device. A lot of times just turning it off, turning it back on solves a lot of the problems themselves. Now, if it starts bogging down again or locking up again, then that helps you eliminate, certain things from your process and helps you narrow down your search a little bit more. All right, step 4. Plan your solution and then fix the problem, or implement the solution, however you want to put it. So first you've come up with a theory, you've tested your theory and be like, yep, that seems to be what the problem is. Now that we know what the actual problem is, we're going to plan how to solve that problem and then implement that solution. This one has gone over before, but we will go over it again. Use the least invasive solution first, and then work, systematically into more and more invasive solutions. And 13, know your starting point. One of the hardest things to kind of get around is a customer just saying, my computer's running slow. What does slow mean? At what point do we consider it slow? We need to know these baseline metrics of the system before we can understand what is actually working at normal range and what is not working in normal range. So you have to know your starting point. Where are you beginning? Because if you're trying to fix something that is normal, you're not going to have much success, are you? Say if it's an older system, it doesn't necessarily move quick, but you've installed a newer version on it. It takes more processing power, so the computer's going to be running a little bit slower. Nothing that can really be done with it. It's still capable of running those programs, but the system is actually still running within normal ranges. So we should know what our starting point is. So who wants to say what step 3 is real quick? What was step 1?
Identify the problem.
Identify the problem. Step 2.
Create a working theory.
Establish a theory. Very good. Step number 3.
Test theory.
Test the theory. Step 4.
Time to fix it.
Plan your solution.
Plan your
and fix the
solution and
problem.
implement the solution. There you go. So implement the solution. So that's step number 4. Step number 5. We haven't gotten there yet, so it's okay. All right. So we'll move along here a little bit. All right. Step number 5. This is the one I cannot tell you how many IT personnel skip this one, which worries me that they may skip the next one too. So you think you've got the problem solved, and like, all right, you're good to go. Have a nice day. Goodbye. You need to verify functionality. Make sure that you actually solved that problem. And take preventative action. If it was a user created issue, you need to educate the user. Show them how to use this, that particular system correctly at that point, or maybe contact their supervisor and say, hey, such and such needs a little bit of training on Excel or on the Trinium system or what have you. You don't necessarily need to go through a whole training course with them, but you need to, on the back end, say, hey, we do have some issues with them being able to use the system properly. They probably will require a little bit more training. So we would have that communication. And typically you would pass that up to your supervisor, and then they would communicate with the supervisor of that individual, not you directly going to their supervisor. Have to maintain a chain of command on that one. All right. So verify functionality and take preventative action. No matter how hard I try, I can't click on Marvin's screen and make it go forward. All right. So one of
keep trying. I believe in you.
I can keep trying, man. Definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. All right. I think that was Einstein's definition. Lastly, we need to document our findings. If this is what's called a black swan event or a unique event, something along those lines, we need to document what happened. you may be the first person to experience this issue and be able to solve it. So if this is the case, you need to help out those who come after you. So you create documentation that lets them basically know, here was the problem I experienced, here's the things I did to solve this problem, and here was the outcome of that solution. I was able to resolve it, or I was not able to resolve it, and you document it. You don't need to draw, you don't need to write out a full novel. You need to be as, quick and concise as possible, but explaining what you've done and move forward. And also say, this is not an issue that comes up very often. So you experience it this time, and now all of a sudden 2 years later, you come across this exact same issue, but you can't remember what you did to solve it. So now you have to go through the whole process all over again to try to get to that solution. Whereas if you documented your findings, you could go right back into the knowledge base of the company, pull it up, you have your solution right there. It saves you a significant amount of time. So this saves you time, this saves your teammates time, everybody else. As long as the documentation is maintained, everybody wins. Yep, still can't click on your screen, Marvin. Maybe tomorrow.
Just yell it out and I'll click it, and then you say next and I got you.
So this might be one that you would need to interact with. Yeah, you got to scroll down. This is the, there we go. So don't overthink the solution. There we go. You got it, Marv?
I do. Adam is panicking that his computer stops working. He calls tech support for your help. You are tech support and you must help. Let's see what you're doing. Let's get started. Is it still showing? Are we still seeing this, Kelly? Because I don't know what's going on here. I haven't used Sway.
Yeah.
I don't like what I see here. I think that's probably just like more of a let's talk through it type situation. Let me see. Share. Oh yeah. So what do you guys see? Because it says show students' names. I wonder, are you seeing something on your end? You know what? I don't like it. So I'm taking over, but I'm going to skip it. So this is a chart, and I think this is the one that Kelly told you to make a copy of or something similar. So this is kind of like a flow chart. If you haven't seen one of those before, you can go back when you can't resolve something. So it's broken. So we have step 1, identify the problem. Step 2, establish that theory. Step 3, test that theory. If by any chance we have to evaluate, see if it's working. If it's not working, we got to go back. We got to establish another theory. You can't keep going, right? I think you know that. As we realize that it is working, now you can establish a plan of action, implement a plan, verify full functionality. Document is the big part for me. And it's because there's a strong likelihood that this happens maybe again.
Marvin, can you stop sharing for just a second?
Yeah.
Never mind. Dang it.
You sure?
Yeah, I'm
So, Alan,
sure.
you fell asleep on us, Alan?
Oh, you tried to get him? What was it?
Look in the chat.
Oh man, I missed it. I was deep. Come on, Alan, get with it. All right. All right, I'm going to start this off as a quick scenario. As an IT professional, you're working on a computer that will not produce audio. We just had that, right? You have already interviewed the client and learned that the following: the audio stopped about 3 weeks ago. it was working and then suddenly stopped. The client hasn't seen any error messages. The client hasn't made any updates or changes to their machine. The data on the machine was backed up an hour ago. How do we proceed with this information? What's pertinent in this conversation? I'm not gonna, we got chats. Let me make sure.
What do you mean, a theory?
Yep, I want to know what can you pull out of that conversation that you had with the client? What was pertinent information? What was the important information that you got from that?
Audio.
Yeah, the audio.
Yep, the
Suddenly
audio's not
stopped.
working.
No error message.
Yep.
No update. Sounds like a hardware issue.
And it stopped how long ago, Jimmy?
3 weeks ago.
Stopped 3
No
weeks ago.
error message.
And no error messages. So, like Jimmy said, you feel like it could be odd. It could be a hardware issue. Could be unplugged. Like, we don't know. So, and the more important thing is, if I do plan to proceed with something, I know that the data on that machine was backed up an hour ago. So I know that everything's backed up. So if I have to go through some processes, I'm covered there. Those are the important things. No error messages, how long it's been, and that the data's backed up. So if I need to do some things, I can and feel comfortable with doing them. Look at this. Could it be on mute? Could it be unplugged? Has a virus affected the system, but we haven't had any error messages. Bad installation of a sound driver, which you can roll back and update. A configuration problem with your sound card, kind of going with what Jimmy said, could be a hardware issue, or simply a problem of compatibility between the operating system and the sound device that you're currently using. So there's several options that you can proceed, and we would want to know, we want to start with the easiest first. And the easiest one is to ask them, is it on mute? Because it could be. Luis, what you have?
Can you go to device manager and install previous version of the audio? Because sometimes when you install something that, when you update something, that update has an issue. And sometimes people go to the previous version because that previous version was working fine.
This is totally true. And what I've done in the past is literally taking the drivers off of that to force it to find a driver, which could possibly resolve the issue. So you're right. That's a possible resolution, because your computer has some basic low-level drivers on it out the box. You have to go to the site of that computer to get more robust package of drivers, but you can get the basic ones. So I would that would be one of the things I would do. I would remove, you know what I would do. I say we have to do a full clean install. That's what I do for $149.99. But now I would go into the device manager, like Louisa said, and address drivers initially to see if that's the issue. If there's that yellow question mark over there, then I know I'm already in the right place because something's not right. So good job on that, Louise.
Let's be real. Most of the time, it's a user error. Their computer's on mute. I had that same issue last week at work. I went to her computer. She's like, it's not. I did this. Went to the bottom right of the screen, on mute. I said, okay. A lot of times it's user error, I feel like.
But that's a quick ticket, open and close right there.
So I like that. And we're still waiting on that, Ms. Sims. Before we leave, we'll probably get that from you, that scenario. Not the one you just spoke of. Okay. So revisiting the objectives for this T session, troubleshooting, we should now be able to describe how to effectively troubleshoot using the 6 steps of the troubleshooting methodology, using the troubleshooting steps and methodologies to diagnose issues. And not to just be motherboard. This issues, period. Any questions? All right.